Hello and welcome back to the PHP MVC Framework series. I did find one more bug. We are right now in the third video of refactoring the validators to be object-oriented programming. And I noticed in the last video that when I hit register here, it gave me the register error, but it did not highlight this one red, and that was working on my Mac machine. And what I noticed when I opened the console is that jQuery was not being included. And so I went and looked, and the way that jQuery is included is if you look in the views and then you go to layouts and look in default, jQuery is actually being set right here. So if I look at my JS directory, jQuery is actually a capital Q, and again I had a lowercase q here. So again, because of case sensitivity, it was not working in Linux and it worked in Mac. So be aware of that. I like developing on Linux because you find these issues. Otherwise you would only find those issues on the server. So now if I refresh here, I don't have a console error, and if I hit register, I get this error message and it highlights the username field red, which is the intended behavior. Alright then, so since we have that done, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and finish up some of our validators. The next validator that I want to do is let's do the Maximum Validator, which is a super simple validation. So let's go ahead and inside of our validators directory, create a new file and call it Max Validator Dot PHP. And what we're going to actually do is copy what's inside of Min Validator here, copy the entire contents of that, and then go to Max Validator and paste that in, and we're going to change the name of the class here to Max Validator. And it's super simple because what we want to do is we want to make sure this is not greater than or equal to, but rather less than or equal to the rule. And what we're going to do to test this is go to users and in the validator function, add a new line and say this run validation, and then we'll say new max validator, and we'll pass in this, and then we're going to say for the field, we want the field to be username, and we want the rule. In this case, we're going to make the rule really small so it's easy to test this. We're going to say 10, and then what we want to do is for the message, we're going to give it a message of username must be less than 150 characters. Because if you remember when we set up our database, we set that as a varchar 150. But just I don't want to type out 150 characters. So just to test it, we're going to put 10 here. So now let's go back to our form. And in the username, I'm going to go ahead and put 4 here. And if you hit register, we got an error. So if we go now to our users on line 29, let's see, I have an error because somehow I closed the array in the wrong spot. That's what it should look like. And it needs a semicolon at the end. Weird. Alright, let's go ahead now and try it again. Alright, username must be at least 6 characters. Let's go over 10 characters. Hit register. Now it said username must be less than 150 characters. So we know that that's working. So let's make this thing 6 characters. Let's just do Curtis, which is 6 characters. And it worked. So that validator is done. And I'll go ahead and remove that from my database because I don't want it there. Alright, so now we got the maximum and minimum validators done. Let's go ahead and look at our register controller and see what else that the username needed. It needed to be required. So let's go ahead and do some required because that'll clean up the first name and last name stuff. So let's see. Go ahead and create in the validators directory a new validator, so a new file, and we're going to call this required validator dot php. And hopefully you guys can see just how easy it is now to create these validations. So this, we're going to open up some PHP tags, and we're going to say class required validator extends our custom validator. And remember, we need to add the public function run validation. And this needs to return true or false. So in order for something to be required, it needs to have something in it. So we're going to say value is equal to this model, and then we'll say this field, and we're going to return. We could do this all in one line. I just think it's easier for you guys to see this broken out. So we'll say passes equals to, and we want this to be not empty value. So if it's empty, it's not going to pass. If it is not empty, it passes, and we'll return passes. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and try that out. So if we go to our users model, and let's just start organizing this a little bit. And at the top, we're going to go ahead and put these in order. So we'll say this run validation. Okay, and then we're going to pass in our validator, which is a new required validator, and we'll pass in this as the first argument. And then the next parameter that we're going to pass is just field, and the field is going to be fname. And the next thing that we need is a message. And you know what? Actually, I want to show you guys what happens if you don't have the field in the message, because we built that throw exception thing in there. Let's go ahead now and let's just refresh and hit register. And see, we have this fatal error, and that's because we threw the exception. It says uncalled exception. You must add a message to the params array. Okay, so then it tells us at what it tells us. Let's see, you must add. Okay, so what we want to do now is we are going to add the message. So we add a message that will pass, and our message is going to be first name is required. Okay, we don't need a rule for this one. We just need the field in the message. So now let's go and try to submit our form without a first name. And now you can see that we have two messages, and it says first name is required, and it's red, and username must be at least 6 characters. Let's do the same thing for the last name. So we'll just copy that. We could do all the fields, the required fields, in an array and loop through them. But just to make this real simple for you guys to read later, we'll do it like this, and then you guys can get fancy with your own code and your own projects. The last name is required. So our first and last name is required. Our username. Let's go and look at our register controller and see what else we need. We have required. We're going to come back to unique. Let's go ahead and do our valid email. So the next thing I want to do is actually in the users, let's go ahead and make the email required as well. So the field will be email, and we'll say email is required. And then let's create a new validator. The new validator that we're going to do is email. So go ahead and create a new file in your validators. So this will be email validator .php. And again, open some PHP tags. We're not going to close them, and we're going to say class email validator extends custom validator. Now when you guys create your own validators, if you need something that we don't create, you'll put it in the custom validators directory inside of the app, and then you will still extend custom validator. Okay, so you'll make your validators exactly like this. You'll just do whatever logic you want and then return true or false in the run validation method. So we're going to add that method, so public function run validation. And then PHP actually gives us a cool little thing we can do. So we're going to say, but actually we want this to run and it not be required. So the first thing we want to do is actually just, we'll say email is equal to this model, this field, okay, and then we're going to set pass equal to true by default. And then what we want to do is put an if statement, and we want to say if not empty. So if there is an email, then we're going to check it. So if not empty email, then we want to make sure it's a valid email. So then we'll say pass is going to be equal to filter var. The first parameter will be email, and then the second parameter will be a constant that this function gives us. So it's filter validate email. Make sure you don't put quotes around that. That is supposed to be a constant. And then after the if statement, we're just going to return pass. So that is it. That will actually wrap up the email validation. So for the email validation, if I just hit register, well, it says email is required, but if I put an A here and hit register, that did not work. So let's see what I did wrong here. This model, this field, pass is equal true if not empty email. So let's do, let's go ahead and do our dump and die here, just to see what I did wrong. So dump and die, we're just going to dump and die pass. Try that again, and it's not hitting that for some reason. Run validation, let's see, back in our users, and that's because I didn't add it because I'm dumb. So we actually need to run the validation for it to work. So we'll say run validation new, and this is going to be email validator. We'll pass in this, and then the field is going to be email. The message is going to be you must provide a valid email address. Alright, now this should work, and I know it's going to work. So what I'm going to do is go back to the email validator and just get rid of this dump and die here. Alright, so now if I hit register, you said you must provide a valid email. So if I do provide a valid email, like rmcurtis@mailinator.com, hit register, now that part of the validation does pass. Okay, and I do want to check one more thing on that just to make sure we don't have any bugs. So if we go to users, and I'm going to take away, I'm just going to comment out the required email, and we're going to make sure that we can just have an empty email if we don't want to make that required. Yes, that works. So it can be empty, but if it's not empty, it has to validate. And that's what that if statement does inside of here, the if not empty email. Alright, so I'm going to uncomment that code because ultimately I want it to be, in my form anyways, I want that to be something that is required. Let's go ahead and shut down the email validator, max validator, required. We don't need any of these open for now. Let's see, what's up next? Let's do another real easy validator real quick, and that's going to be Numeric Validator Dot PHP. So we'll just open up PHP tags. This one's going to be super easy. So Numeric Validator extends custom validator, and then we have our public function run validation, and this is just going to get our value. We're actually going to do the same thing here. We want this to, if it's not empty, so we're going to say value is going to equal this model this field, and then we're going to say if not empty value, then we're going to run this, but we need to go ahead and initialize pass here with true, just in case they want it to be so if not empty value, then we're going to say pass is equal to is numeric value. And then all we're going to do is, after that if statement, we are going to return pass. Alright, so let's try that out. So if we just go to users, what's a field we're not validating on right now? Not do anything with passwords. So let's try it on password. We're not going to keep this. It doesn't make much sense, but this run validation new numeric validator this, and then for our field we want that to be password, and for our message we want that to be password must be a number. That doesn't really make sense for password. We're just going to use the password thing just to test it. So now if I don't do anything, we don't have an error message for password, but if I put a letter here like A and refresh, it says password must be a number. So if I get rid of that and I put the number 12 there and register, then it passes. Okay, so we're not actually going to need that validator for this form, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that line. I was just testing it out since we just built it. Let's see. The next one we need to do is our password stuff, and we need to do a password called matches, to where we can make sure both of these match. In order to do that, we got to do a little bit of some funky stuff, which is why I kind of pushed this one off to the end for this particular form. So in our users.php, I want to add a new protected, well, it can be private, that's fine. So I'm going to add a new private property, and we're just going to call it confirm. Okay. Then what we need to do is we need to go down to our model. Actually, we need to create some getters and setters for that. So go back to users.php and use a public function set confirm, and that's going to take a value, and then we'll just say this confirm equals value. That's it. And then we need another method to get it, so public function get confirm, and that will be no parameters, and we're just going to return this confirm, Okay. So we have a couple things there. Then what we want to do is inside of our register controller, right here by this assign deal here, what we want to do is say new user set confirm, and it's going to come from post confirm. The other thing that we actually want to do is, since that's going to be coming from the form inside of our set thing here, we don't really want to just set that. We want to go ahead and sanitize that. So we'll use our form helper sanitize function. Actually, we don't need to do that either. What we can do, which is a better thing to do, is inside of our register controller, instead of just setting it equal to post confirm, if we use our input method, so input get confirm, so if you use that, it will actually sanitize it in that function, in that get function. Okay, so that'll set it. So then in the form, we need to go back to the register.php, and I told you we were going to change this, but look for the confirm password here, and right here where it says this new user, we need to pass in the get confirm method. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now and see if that works. Okay, that appears to have worked, and we'll know for sure in a minute. So then what we need to do is add a new validator. We're going to call this one matches validator dot php, and we're going to open some PHP tags, and then we're going to say class matches validator extends our custom validator, and we need to add our public function run validation method. Then what we want to do here is we're going to say value is equal to this model this field, and what we want to do is return whether or not value is equal, we'll use two, so we're just going to turn value is equal to this rule. Okay, so we're going to use the rule thing to pass that in. So in order to do that, let's go back to our users, and up here we're going to add, let's do it underneath the username here. We're going to say this run validation, and we're going to use our new matches validator. First parameter is always this. Then what we're going to do is for the field, that's going to be password. The rule will actually be this confirm, and then the message will be your passwords do not match. Okay. Also notice here that on this one I need to change that back to 150. All right. So let's go back here now and let's just put two different things in a password. And now it says your passwords do not match. Let's go ahead and do the same thing and see if it passes. All right, so now those two pass. So that validator is working correct. Let's look at our original register controller and see what it needs. So passwords need to be required and a minimum of 6. So let's go back to the users and go ahead and add that validation now. So right here, I'm just going to copy this required one up here, paste it, and we're going to say the field is password, and the message will be password is required, and then we're going to make that also do a minimum. So this run validation new min validator, this field is going to be password, and the message will be password must be a minimum of 6 characters. All right. Let's look back at our register controller now. Let's see. The only thing that we need to check now is we need one more validator, and it's going to be the most complex out of all of them, but don't worry, it's not that bad. We need to create a unique, so we need to make sure that the username and the email are unique to our database. So we'll add a new file, and we're going to say unique.php. We're rounding third base, heading towards home on the validators, guys. So just hang in here. So now what we need to do is on the unique one, say class unique validator extends custom validator, and then we need a public function run validation, and we're going to say our field is equal to and we need to know if this is an array, because this field we want to be able to check multiple things. So for example, say you had contacts, and you wanted to make a contact's name unique, but only per account ID. So you could add an array to that to make it work like that. But what we need to do is say if field is array, this field, this is a ternary operator here, so if is array this field, then it's going to be this field 0th index, so the first one will always be the field you're talking about, else we're just going to make it this field. Alright, the next thing that we need to do is get our value, and that, just like any other time, is going to be this model. And this time, what we're going to do is say, instead of this field, we're just going to say field. Okay. The next thing we do, we're actually going to make a database call, so we're going to need to start building out our conditions. So the conditions are going to be equal to an array, and the first one in there is going to be field is equal to, and then we're going to use a question mark because we're going to bind this. So we're going to say binds will equal an array as well, and that will be value. All right, the next thing that we want to do is check if we're updating a record. Before we had two different validators, but this we can just add an if statement. So we're going to say if not empty, this model, and then we're checking on ID. Well, if not empty the ID, then we're updating. So then what we need to do is add to the conditions, and that will be, we're checking for ID is equal to a question, and we need to add to the bind, and we're going to bind this model ID. Okay. Whoops. All right, once we have that if statement done, the next thing that we want to do is check if fields is an array, we need to loop through those and add those all as conditions. So this allows you to check multiple fields, okay, for unique. All right, so then what we need to do is we're going to say if, we just need to know if is array this field. If that's an array, then the first thing we need to do is take off the first, we need to take off the first oops, element of that array. So the array unshift, and then we're going to say this field. So we're taking one element off of that array, and then we're going to loop through those. So we're going to say for each this field as, and I'm going to call this adds for like additional fields or something. So then what we need to do is say conditions, and we're just going to say adds is equal to a question mark, and then whoops, I forgot the semicolon there, and then we'll say bind, and we're going to bind on this model adds. Okay, so that will actually build out our query and our bind. The next thing we need to do is actually create that. We need to create that. Let's see. We need to create some query params to actually fire this thing off. So query params, because this is checking the database if this already exists. So query params is going to equal an array, and that array is just going to be conditions, and we will pass in conditions and bind, and that will be bind. So that is our query params. And then we're looking for another record. So we're saying other is equal to this model, and we'll use the find first method and then pass in query params. All right, that's going to actually use the find first method. In our case, it'll be on the users table, and then we're going to return not other. So that will be if there's not a record, that's actually a good thing, because then it means it's not unique, okay, or that it is unique. So we need to reverse this logic and say if not other on the return. All right then, so let's use this now and try it out. So what I want to do is on the username, we want to make sure the username is unique. So this run validation new, and then we'll say unique validator. We'll pass in this, and then for the second param is going to be an array. Field is going to be username, and then message is going to be that username already exists. Please choose a new one. Okay, so let's try it. May not work. So the username I have in my database already is Parham Curtis, so I'm going to try that one to see if it fails first. Alright, so we got a problem here in the unique validator. The class unique validator is not found. So did I spell something wrong here? Let's look back at, oh, and that's because I named it just unique instead of, so I'm going to rename that to unique validator. We'll go back now. We'll try again. So now I'm going to say parham Curtis. This should not pass. Yep, and you see that username already exists. Please choose a new one. So then I'm going to do parham Tony, and that passes. One thing to keep in mind is this actually is doing a database call every time you use the unique thing. And in most cases, it's not going to be a problem, but if you're doing that instead of a big loop or something, that will be a problem. All right then, so we have the last validator done. So the last thing that we need to do is clean up our register controller, make sure we have everything. So we got these. Username should be a max of 150, emails max 150. So if we add those max validators for username, so let's just go to, oh, we did for username, we just need to do it for email. So email, I'm going to copy this max validator and put it right here. And for our email, the field here is going to be email, and then we'll say email must be less than 150 characters. Now we've validated everything we originally had validated on there. So we can go ahead and remove this. Whoa. That's weird. I went to another screen somehow. So we can actually remove all this commented out code that we left for reference. And look at that. Look how small our register action is now. This is awesome. This is what a controller action should look like. And now all of the validation is happening inside of the user's model. We still have a little more cleanup to do. So now one thing that's not working anymore with this refactor is our cross-site request forgery refactor that we did. We need to add that to this new validation stuff. So we're going to do that in the next video, as well as go ahead and clean up our remaining form. And then we will be done with this refactor, and I'll see you guys in the next video.